All right, so we are live. I wanted to do this impromptu stream because I felt like I needed to maybe sometimes you feel like you want to talk, not necessarily to any one person or anybody in general, but you get this sort of weird feeling when it comes to social media and video games. And it's gotten to the point where I feel like there really isn't an avenue for any real discussion about anything. There are just these blanket statements that make absolutely no sense from people who, you know, don't know anything about creating video games or making video games. And I'm one of those people. I've never designed a video game. I've never created a video game. I've never had to make, decisions or choices when it came to those video games and, what was going to be in them versus what wasn't going to be in them. DDP 540 says, I'm gonna need to see it delivered first, but it sounds great and looked way better than last year. So I've got a lot of clips from Digital Foundry's recent breakdown of the game, and they bring up some really great points. I'm going to get to those in this stream. That's what primarily prompted me to want to do this. But I felt like there's so much noise anymore, and there's this need, it seems, to instantly find something negative with everything as opposed to just enjoying what's being presented to us, wondering about what it's going to feel like, what it's going to be like when we explore these new games like Spider-Man or Starfield or anything else that was shown. Instead, it's this deflection to the negative. And most of the people, and I mean almost 100% of the people that are pushing this negativity, that are saying these things, trying to sound like developers, are really, really sounding foolish when you actually look at some people who do this for a living, when you listen to them, when you look for information. I'm not saying that Starfield is going to be the best game ever. I'm not trying to defend Xbox. I mean, if you look at my channel, I've been down on Xbox for quite a long time because they just haven't delivered. And that's the honest feeling that I get when I look at my Xbox. And it's not that I'm trying to convince anybody to switch to PlayStation. It's just how I feel when it comes to these things. So after the showcase, I was very excited. As somebody who's been down on Xbox for quite a while, I personally feel like they did what I've been asking them to do for quite a long time, and that's one, show me some new content that's first party and that I am attracted to. Buck Roger says, "Hi, Worry Ward. How you doing, Buck Roger? Show me stuff that I'm attracted to from first party that looks good." That's what I've been asking from Xbox for a long time. And at the showcase, I personally feel like they delivered on that. The second thing was do something unique, do something that really wows me. And I personally, again, folks, I'm not trying to convince you to buy an Xbox, but I personally feel like they did that when it comes to Starfield. And of course, instantly, there's negativity around a metric that isn't met, that somehow we all know should be met because we've all developed games, right? Of course we haven't. And of course, there are other games that don't meet those metrics that are very, very good. But instead of asking yourself, why isn't it meeting that metric? We have things like, here's Star Wars Outlaws, and you can take off from the planet and fly into space. So therefore, that means Starfield should have it. These are completely different games. One is huge. The other is a linear, semi-open world experience. It's like comparing an ant to a human being and saying, why can't that human being lift 10 times their weight? It just doesn't make sense. So when I watch this Digital Foundry breakdown, okay, these are people who, I'm just going to defer to them because I'm not a developer and I'm not somebody that breaks down these games technically, but what they said first and foremost when it came to the design decision, I think it's very important to listen to what they say here. So I'm going to add that up to the stream and let's give it a listen.
Design decision here is what makes this 30 FPS. And Todd Howard's statement about it reinforces why, though, 30 FPS.
Yes.
So I'm going to read this off here. I think it'll come as no surprise, given our previous games, what we go for. All these huge open worlds, fully dynamic, hyper detailed, where anything can happen.
So let me stop it right there. Okay. I think it comes as no surprise, given our previous games. So right there, I say to myself, okay, there were plenty of other previous games from Todd Howard and Bethesda that weren't 60 frames per second. All of those games existed. All of those games did very well. All of those games, millions of people enjoyed. But for some reason, we're jumping to a negative with this one because it's meeting the demands of all those other previous games. And we'll get into what those demands are and why those demands dictate the decision that was made. Let's continue.
And we do want to do that. It's 4K on the Series X and 1440p on this S. We do lock it at 30 because we want that fidelity. We want all that stuff. So that's talking about like the world. It's not just talking about the resolution.
Right. I think that's a lot of confusion, right? He says the word fidelity, you think just graphics, but clearly, as he just noted, there's more to it than that.
Yeah. And we don't want to sacrifice any of that.
So right there, folks, the idea of saying we want the fidelity, and a lot of people jump to the idea that, well, they're trading resolution for frame rate. Fidelity doesn't mean resolution necessarily when it comes to these type of games. They're talking about the experience of tracking each individual object within the world and having its position related to you at hour 10, at hour 30, at hour 100, at hour 200. If you pick up something and put it somewhere in Starfield, it's got to be tracked throughout the entirety of your playthrough. A world millions of miles away has to maintain what you did on it at hour 30, hour 50, hour 100. That type of fidelity is what they want in this particular game. It's got very little to do with just resolution. Let me get to some of these chats for a second, and then I'll get back to it. So Xbox brought that on themselves with their marketing, though. We don't know if Starfield's creative decision will pay off either. If the game delivers this, we do know that it will pay off because we have a reference. We have Elder Scrolls, we have Oblivion, we have Skyrim, we have Fallout. All of those games talk about and deliver on this fidelity in terms of the gameplay and what you're able to do in it. It's not necessarily all about resolution when it comes to this specific decision. Buck Rogers, Look at Switch games, man, barely hit 30 frames per second, yet if the game is fun. See, yes, we're talking about resolution frame rate doesn't make the game fun or not. But in particular, Starfield, these decisions to cap it at 30 revolve around allowing Bethesda to create a game that they want to create and offer in that game all of the things that they want to offer. Whether or not they deliver or not, I can't say because it hasn't released, but I do know that they have delivered that sense of immersion in the past with Skyrim, with Oblivion, with Fallout. And again, we'll get into why they made these decisions. Happy Cloud Gamer says, yes, 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 thank you. Let's get back to it.
Fortunately, in this one, we've got it running great. It's often running way above that. Sometimes it's 60, but on the consoles, we do lock it because we prefer the consistency where you're not even thinking about it.
So he just talked about the fact that the game runs sometimes at 30, sometimes 50, sometimes 60 frames per second, but they lock it down to 30, not because they're worried about the fidelity in terms of the resolution. They want the world building. They want to offer something in this role-playing game that's different. And on a console, folks, we're talking about a console to be able to deliver that level of immersion. This is what they have to do. Happy Cloud Gamer says, this is not me protecting Starfield devs all about 30 frames per second, but I most time will want to play games in 4K on a big screen versus 1440p 60. This entire stream isn't about resolution or frame rate. I get that you want to play in 4K. That's fine. Some people don't. This is about 30 frames per second isn't a reflection of some failing in some system or in some design around the game. This is an artist that wants to create something, and they've got a palette that has limitations. And in order to deliver everything that they want, they're going to have to tweak and they're going to have to make concession to get that. Do you want them to take everything out that makes it unique and have it be 60 frames per second? Because I think some people, when we get back to that fidelity comment, they think resolution, and they think, well, just lower the resolution to 720p and you can get 60. That's not what they're talking about when they say fidelity. They would have to take out that idea of individually tracking you throughout the entirety of your playthrough to give you that level of immersion. They don't want to take that out. And they don't have an unlimited resource box. They've got a console. So in order to get that experience, that's what they're talking about. That's what I wanted to get across. Happy Cloud Gamer says, so if Starfield runs at a stable 30 frames per second, I would want that more than to sacrifice detail in the game just to hit 60. That's what they're talking about. They're not saying that, the Xbox is crap because we can't get 60. They can get 60, but they would have to take things out that makes the game that style of role-playing game. And then we'll get into some more comments from Digital Foundry. The next one in particular and the one after that are very, very telling and explain exactly what I'm talking about. It's less about some metric that isn't being met or some failing that you can use on social media. And it's more about just one particular design choice to make a game what they want it to be, what they want it to convey. And that's more important than hitting a metric. If you have to take everything out of Spider-Man to make it Spider-Man, then what's the point? And by the way, we'll get into some things in games that have released that offer performance modes that are absolutely terrible. And they talk about that too. So let's get to the next thing they talk about.
Star Wars Jedi Survivor and then the Final Fantasy 16 demo.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Both of these games have a quality mode, and then they have a performance mode. And the performance mode in both cases I found to be, frankly, not good enough. It's very unstable.
So both of these games come out. People complain, where's the 60 frames per second? They put it in there. They gave you the option. But the option makes the game run worse. It runs worse. And why does it run worse? Because we're talking about video game consoles. We're not talking about high-end PCs that cost thousands of dollars. We're talking about a design decision. and they add these performance modes in, but they don't meet expectations. Why would you want them if the game runs worse?
It does not feel great. It often falls out of the VRR range on the PlayStation 5. It's not the way I would want to play. And in those cases, I would say go with the quality mode, 30 frames per second, steady, good motion blur. That's the way it should be, given what we have. Even though you would like to see a stable 60, it's preferable to have a stable 30 versus an unstable 60.
So let's talk about that for a second. Here you've got two games, Star Wars, and you've got the Final Fantasy 16 demo, which just released. Okay. Now, if they released both of these games and they were locked at 30 frames per second, people would complain, oh, it's a fail. The game stinks. The consoles aren't powerful. And that is just not true. It's just not true. They offer performance modes in both of these games, and the performance mode actually makes the game run worse. Why? One, we're talking about a console, and two, we're talking about the creative decision. And if locking it at 30 frames per second makes that game feel better, perform more stable, then what are we really complaining about? Happy Cloud Gamer says, yes, you were absolutely right. In this case, I think I am, but most of the time I'm more than willing to be wrong. DDP 540 says, will Starfield have a stable 30 frames per second on console? That's what they're talking about. That's what they're saying. They're saying they're shooting for that stable 30 frames per second, not because the system can't do 60. They want that because they want to give you that physical simulation. And again, we're going to get into the next thing they talk about. They compare it to Star Citizen, not No Man's Sky. It is not a No Man's Sky game in any sense of the word. It's more like Star Citizen on PC. And in that game, you can go to multiple different places. Some of them are barren and empty, and some of them are filled with worlds to explore, NPCs, wildlife, everything you can imagine. And in order to allow for all of that physical simulation, and also allow for you to have objects tracked throughout the entirety of your playthrough, wherever you go, in order to meet that stability, in order to keep those things in the game, the things that make the game, the things that make it why you're purchasing it. You're not purchasing it just to run it at 60 frames per second. It's like saying, I want everything about Skyrim, Oblivion, Starfield. I want everything that makes these RPGs different, and Bethesda RPGs. I want you to take all of that out just so you can get to 60. Why would you buy the game? Why would they build it? And again, we're not on a PC, we're on a console. To me, the expectation on the console is you're going to get these trade-offs. I just want to see evolution from one generation to the next. Star Citizen isn't a real game. It's one of the biggest scams in gaming history. Well, we're going to get to that. I'm going to wait to see the problems with it before I buy it. One David Boger. So let's get to what he's talking about here.
Where here's me just running around a lonely, desertified moon of a planet. You know, it's like a planetoid. It's pretty empty. There's just like rocks on the ground, some larger formations. It's like the average, no offense, No Man's Sky kind of planet. It's like pretty, it's not, there's not a lot going on there. And if you look there, this is running on an RTX 2070 Super and Ryzen 5 3600. You'll see that on the top right-hand corner, where next to GPU, it says the GPU utilization percentage, and there it's 99%. And that means the GPU is the limiting factor here. It's running close to 60 FPS, above 60 FPS almost on this PC.
So this particular world with nothing on it, a barren wasteland that you explore, can run at 60 frames per second. However, this game offers the idea of an entire universe. And when you get to a planet, say, where there are buildings, structures, multiple NPCs, multiple different animals, all kinds of different trees, physical simulations. Then you have to track what you're doing, what you're buying, what you're selling, what you're placing down has to stay where you placed it throughout your entire playthrough. So at the 100th hour, when you come back to that planet that you visited 100 hours ago, that object that you positioned has to be in the position. In order to have all of that, that's the gameplay. That's the fidelity that they're talking about. They're not talking about fidelity as in resolution. They're talking about fidelity as in the meat of the gameplay. In order to have all of that, the design decision is to get it at 30.
That's good. But the game isn't all these type of barren planets. A large part of the game in Star Citizen is also, like we saw in the Starfield trailer, you go to like larger cities. And there, when I go to those areas in Star Citizen, I'm going to show, there's a couple clips here where one where I'm riding on the monorail going through the city, and you'll just see the frame rate is like at like 17 to 24 or 25 FPS. It's brutal. But if you look at the GPU utilization, it's way below 100. It's like 50%, and the CPU is just being destroyed. It's like at 100% almost on every single thread. So this is the kind of thing that I think is maybe happening to a degree in Starfield. There's areas that are much heavier on the CPU than other areas, and to lock it down more consistently, they thought a 30 FPS cap would be better. Obviously, Star Citizen's not the exact same game as Starfield. It's completely different development history, but it is a similar concept idea of going from different areas, ones that are more sparsely populated and ones that are much, 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 much more populated.
So you go from worlds that are sparsely populated to worlds that are much, much, much more populated in a console video game. And in order to deliver all of that fidelity, folks, not resolution, in order to deliver that experience, because you're buying Starfield for that experience. You're buying it because you want to go to all of these planets that are handcrafted for the story. And then as you're playing that story in those worlds, you want to branch off. Maybe somebody runs over to you and says, hey, can you help me with this? And you have a side quest. All of that handcrafted stuff, that writing that's in the game. By the way, they've confirmed there's more lines of dialogue in this game than Skyrim and Fallout combined, which means on these handcrafted worlds, there's plenty to do story-wise, side quest-wise, meeting NPCs, exploring, discovering. There's plenty to do. And in order to give you that level of fidelity and then add in the 1,000 procedurally generated planets that you can also go to, because it's not a No Man's Sky game. It's more akin to the idea behind Star Citizen. It's not Star Citizen, but if you're going to compare, it's more akin to that idea as opposed to No Man's Sky. If you're going to have that much fidelity in that game on a console, I would want them to keep that in there and make it stable, because you've got games like Star Wars that offer that performance mode because people are screaming for it, and it doesn't run well in that mode. So why have it? You got the demo for Final Fantasy 16 that offers it, and it doesn't run well. So why have it? It's not just a win because it's there. Sometimes it's worse in terms of the vision of what the artist wants you to experience. Happy Cloud Gamer says, game developers make their games on high-end PC, so to expect this insane, huge game, Starfield, to run on cheap and old hardware on console is a bit crazy. So stable 30 frames per second is all fine for me. So I wouldn't necessarily say that these are cheap. These are more powerful than most consoles have been, especially if you've been buying consoles as long as I had, way back the Atari 2600. But I just expect the evolution from one generation to the next. I couldn't get something like Starfield on an Xbox One. I just couldn't. Could they lower the resolution? Because if fidelity to you is resolution, folks, if you want these games to run at 720p just to hit 60 frames per second, and by the way, just lowering the resolution wouldn't do that. They would have to take out fidelity, as in gameplay mechanics, the idea of tracking you. I keep bringing that up. That's what these games are known for. I went into a town in Skyrim in my 10th hour of playing it, and I remember this. my 10th hour of playing Skyrim, and I shot an arrow at someone and it landed in a tree. I went back to, I think it was Riften in Skyrim. I went back there at I think it was hour 40 or 50, and the friggin' arrow was still in the tree. That's the type of fidelity that they're talking about in their games. They're not talking about them in someone else's games. And you can't compare like for like. You can't look at Star Wars Outlaws and say, look, she ran into a ship and took off and went into space, so therefore Starfield is a failure. In Outlaws, can you go to different planets? Is there fidelity that tracks each individual thing that you do? No, it's not there. These are different experiences. Magnum Gaming says, I wonder if every sandwich is different. You mean the sandwiches where she put the sandwiches on? That's something else that's a good point. There was a demonstration. Buck Roger ported to Switch. That's not happening. Maybe a cloud version. There was a demonstration where one of the developers said she likes to put sandwiches, and they talk about this. Digital Foundry talks about this. She likes to put sandwiches in one part of her ship and build them up on a table. That's the fidelity that they're talking about, because she can put 1,000 sandwiches on that table and come back after exploring the entirety of the game, every world, and do countless different things. And those 1,000 sandwiches still have to be where she left them, in the exact position that she left them. That's the type of fidelity that they're trying to give you in these Bethesda RPGs. They gave it to you in Oblivion. They gave it to you in Skyrim. By the way, the Skyrim special editions were 1080p 30, and everyone loves them. Remember last generation? 1080p makes you a better gamer? Why weren't we talking about frame rate then? Because this one metric was better, and we can use it to get traction on social media. And now we've got this other metric. It just doesn't make sense individually for each type of game. That's all I'm trying to say. I would rather have them meet their vision and create the type of role-playing game that they're known for, and give me all of that physical simulation. And if on a box like a console, in order to give me that performance, that fidelity, and have it be stable, it has to be 30, then I'm fine with it. And most people are going to be too. Happy Cloud Gamer says, how would 720p look 85-inch 4K TV? I'm assuming that's nope, N-O-P. I'll take 4K 30. I'm a Bethesda fanboy. So 30 frames per second is not new for me when we talk about Bethesda games. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to get through to people. It's not this instant failure. It's case by case. It's what is the game delivering? And we're talking about a closed box like a console. Again, performance modes are given to some games that come out, and they are running worse.
Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and then the Final Fantasy 16 demo.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Both of these games have a quality mode, and then they have a performance mode. And the performance mode in both cases I found to be, frankly, not good enough. It's very unstable. It does not feel great. It often falls out of the VRR range on the PlayStation 5. It's not the way I would want to play. And in those cases, I would say, go with the quality mode, 30 frames per second, steady, good motion blur. That's the way it should be, given what we have. Even though you would like to see a stable 60, it's preferable to have a stable 30 versus an unstable 60.
So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the idea that you have some people that are screaming, if there isn't a performance mode, the game isn't good. And they give you that mode, and the game is absolutely horrible in that mode, because the developer just can't get it to where they want it to be. And if they want it at a certain resolution, at a certain frame rate, without any of that fidelity, because Star Wars and Final Fantasy is not tracking everything you do, a physical simulated RPG, like Starfield is, like Skyrim does, like Oblivion does, like Fallout does. It just doesn't do that. If it looks better and the performance is more stable at 30, why would you complain about that? If you're buying a console, stop playing on console. 1296p 30 right now. I have no idea what that means. If you're talking about the resolution grab that they took from the trailer, I would say probably not a great metric to use when you're pulling resolution from a trailer as opposed to the entirety of the game. But again, if you watch the entirety of their video, they do talk about the fact that the resolution scales incredibly well and the picture looks fantastic. So if we're going to take parts of this Digital Foundry video and forget about everything else around it, that's what I'm speaking against. I'm speaking against that when it comes to everything. When it comes to gaming, I could go online right now and say 30 frames per second. I can make countless videos. I can get tons more subscribers to my channel. But I know what Bethesda RPGs are. I know people that love them. I love them. I know what to expect. So when I see stuff like this, I think to myself, does anybody play video games? Do you know developers? Do you know their history? Do you know their works? Because clearly you don't. If you're comparing a linear / semi-open world game like Star Wars Outlaws to Starfield, and you're taking one metric, flying into space, and saying Starfield doesn't do that, so it's a fail. It's for Flash. It's for YouTube. I'm tired of that. I don't want to do that. I would rather tell you that Starfield is going to be the ultimate evolution of Bethesda RPGs. Do you like Oblivion? Did you play through Oblivion? I did. I absolutely loved it. I didn't care what the resolution was back then. Nobody told me. I just purchased it because that's the style of RPG I wanted. And I loved it. I also loved Morrowind. Remember Morrowind? That was a big PC RPG. My experience with it was on the original Xbox. It was probably much worse than the PC version. I don't know. But I could do more things in that RPG than I could in other RPGs. Certainly more than I could in Final Fantasy back then. The Final Fantasy was more popular back then. It's probably more popular now. But I could do more in terms of actually role-playing. There was more fidelity to the experience and not resolution. We already talked about what that means. So why would I be upset that they're building upon what they've already built? DDP 540 says, the last Bethesda game I played was Fallout 4. They have a lot to show me. Well, look, Fallout 4 did extremely well. There are games that I don't like that are extremely popular and very successful. So the you not liking something doesn't apply to almost anything in gaming. Just like me liking something doesn't apply. We're talking about just a metric of 30 frames per second making the game be bad. And it's just not going to be bad because it's a Bethesda game. Buck Roger, I still play on my Sega Genesis because it has high definition graphics. They put that right on the front of the console, didn't they? Says right. Oh, they says right on the system. Yeah, I have mine and I'm looking at it and it says high definition graphics because even back then they knew how incredibly stupid some people are when it comes to playing with toys. It's marketing. I would rather have a Bethesda game be a Bethesda game. I would rather have an Insomniac game be an Insomniac game. If Insomniac said, you know, we have Spider-Man 2, huge open city to do things in. We added burrows and we have a performance mode. It's 60 frames per second, but it's all over the place. The performance is all over the place. Why in the world would I play it in that mode? And why would you want that? Just so that you can say, oh, it's got a 60 frames per second mode and Starfield does it. Let me make a video about it. I'm going to get more subscribers. I'm going to get more engagement on Twitter. The truth is, this is a fine decision for this type of a game. Absolutely, positively fine. I made the case, and clearly Digital Foundry did as well. It's just there's this noise. There's this addiction to picking somebody on social media, Xbox or PlayStation, subscribing to them and retweeting everything that they say, and they know it and they use it to get you to do that. I'd much rather talk to you about this particular game or any particular game and get excited about it and tell you why it's exciting. Because no game is exciting because of the resolution or the frame rate. None. And I don't want any game or any developer to change the style of game that they've created because of some vocal minority who know almost nothing about what they're talking about. Almost nothing.
Survivor and then the Final Fantasy 16 demo.
Watch this again.
Both of these games have a
Here's
quality
your
mode,
performance
and then
mode
they have a performance mode. And
that
the
you want
performance
so
mode
bad in
both
these
cases
games.
I found to be, frankly, not good enough. It's very unstable. It does not feel great. It often falls out of the VRR range on the PlayStation 5. It's not the way I would want to play. And in those cases, I would say
So why
go
would
with
you
the
want
quality
that?
mode.
Why would you want that? Just so you can win an argument versus actually get a game that feels good, that performs consistently.
Design decision here is what makes this 30 FPS. And Todd Howard's statement about it reinforces why, though, 30 FPS.
Yes.
So I'm going to read this off here. I think it'll come as no surprise given our previous games.
No surprise,
what we go
folks,
for.
because
all
it's a
these
Bethesda
huge
game.
open worlds, fully dynamic, hyper
It's not
detailed, where
Insomniac.
anything can happen. And we do
It's not Final
want
Fantasy.
to do that. It's 4K on the Series X and 1440p on this S. We do lock it at 30 because we want that fidelity. We want all that stuff. So that's talking about like the world. It's not just talking about the resolution.
Right. I think that's a lot of confusion, right? He says the word fidelity, you think just graphics, but clearly, as he just noted, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, and we don't want to sacrifice any of that. Fortunately, in this one, we've got it running great. It's often running way above that. Sometimes it's 60, but on the consoles, we do lock it because we prefer the consistency.
They prefer the consistency. Sometimes it is 60 frames per second, but they prefer the consistency. And that consistency allows for the fidelity of the experience. Fidelity does not mean resolution when it comes to this style of role-playing game. It means the physical simulations that are tracked over the entirety of your playthrough. That's what they're talking about. And on a closed system like a console, that's what they have to do. Happy Cloud Gamer says gaming has become extremely negative thanks to social media. Some content creators are witch hunting game developers just for views. Most of them are doing that. That's the problem. And the problem is that most of them are successful at becoming huge because this is what people want on social media, as opposed to what I'm doing here, telling you should absolutely be excited for Starfield if you're a Bethesda RPG fan. It looks phenomenal. It's going to deliver a great Bethesda-style RPG experience. But instead, we're going to compare it to a game that isn't even close to being what it is. Rather than just focus in on both of those different games and be excited for what they're delivering. That's the point of this stream. That's the point of showing this Digital Foundry content. And I hope everybody is excited to play whatever's coming out. Get the information about the game. Get the information about what you're going to do, what you're going to experience, what it's going to be like in that world, the characters, the story, the setting, the gameplay. Focus on that. Happy Cloud Gamer. Yes, I will have no life after Starfield is coming out. Well, those Bethesda-style RPGs do take quite a bit of time. That's the point of this stream. That's what I wanted to say. I'm going to cut it short because I feel like I made the point. I appreciate everybody watching, stopping in. And do yourself a favor. Don't support people that are witch hunting for views because it's just lazy and it doesn't lead to any joy when it comes to gaming. None. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next stream.